career path. I mean, you've been in the trenches. You've come up as a contract administrator. I know that is the goalkeeper's job sometime in construction, and you've worked your way up quite amazingly into a director of tricks of the trade. And I have watched some of your videos, and I've seen the people that you've had on, and I thought, wow, I need to get Michelle on this show. Tell me a little bit about that journey of how you've got to be in this contract eagle that swoops in and hopefully saves some of us in these situations we find ourselves.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a crazy story. So the short version is I didn't really choose construction. Construction chose me. So I was working in local government. Some engineers took friendly to me and thought, this woman's clever, we can teach her a thing or two. And I was really blessed to have some engineers who would take me to site. I was mentored by a female engineer who was 60 when she started mentoring me. So she'd been her whole life in construction as well. So I had some people choose me who took me on a journey and showed me how great construction can be. And the good thing about it was that I actually came into the industry in local government where it wasn't my money. I didn't have budgets that, so it's different in government, right? Because you have buckets of money you have to spend, and you're giving community facilities to people who are so grateful. So the gratification of building in that context is exponentially different than if you're working for a commercial builder and you've got budgets and you're actively, trying to make a profit for your boss. So I left local government, did a little stint in state government, and I was so aware that if I stayed in government, I would never be able to hack it in private enterprise. I sought out a building company, and I was a commercial contracts administrator for that building company for a few years. And I was in a regional office where everyone was really friendly. The subbies were like family. I used to get them in to do their stat decks with them every month, and I would certify their stat deck and fax it off to the big head office. So I had a really great relationship with the subbies. And then our work dried up. I ended up getting moved to the city office, and things were totally different. Like totally different. It was like I'd been taken out of one world and put into this really tough world. And I was just going, what is going on? This is the same business. This is the same company. But I was put onto projects that were in financial distress. There was disputes with the subbies. People were getting short paid left, right and centre. Now, I never thought I could do the maths to do a construction management degree, and I have got a crippling fear of heights. I do not do scaffold. So I knew I had like a limited time in construction to be site-based. So, and it was hard emotionally to deal with the fear of heights thing. I was studying law instead of construction management during that period, and that all stemmed from my days in local government where I wanted to prosecute politicians for misuse of public funds. That was my job.
Nice. Yeah, good.
But this baptism of fire into the commercial construction world really lit a fire for me to start helping the subbies, because I had to do things in that job I did not feel good about, and businesses went broke as a result of those things. Now, I can pass on the blame and say that wasn't my call. I was under instruction, but at the end of the day, I had to use my brain to effectively work out how to outsmart these people so that we could hoodwink them out of money. So, but what happened was, in that period, I had a front row seat of what the decision tree is for a builder that's in financial distress, and how they triage and pay people and manage their contracts. And so every single go-to trick that a commercial manager or a project manager or construction contracts administrator might make to short pay a subby or get one over them under the contract, I learnt all that stuff. And when I finished my law degree, I went to work for a construction law firm, and it was crazy. I was driving my ute to site at 6 o'clock in the morning one week on the Friday. My phone's ringing from 6 a.m.
Of course.
And then the next Monday I start in a law firm, and I turn up in the elevator, and I'm sort of sitting in this ivory tower with no windows, and the phone never rings. I was just going, this is not me at all. And I said to the principal of the law firm, I said, look, it really troubles me that these subbies are coming in. The first thing we make them do is put money in trust, like big chunks of money in trust. they're already bleeding from the neck because they haven't been paid. So protracted non-payment, have to come and pay us. And it's like tens of thousands of dollars to do anything from a legal perspective for them. I was saying to him, like, if they just sent one email, if they just given this one notice, if they'd just done this one thing, and he's saying to me, that's not what lawyers do, Michelle. Like, there is a market for that. There is a need for that, but no subby is going to pay lawyers' rates for admin grade work, is what this guy said to me.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Subbies will pay lawyers' rates for admin grade work, and I don't charge lawyers' rates.
No,
but the
no,
thing
good.
is, if you package it in a way that they can have access to things, there's ways and efficiencies for things to be done.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I just couldn't be in the law firm context.
No.
So when I left the law firm, the subbies from the jobs that I had been working on started calling me.
Good.
Going, can you help me with this builder? They're not paying me. Or can you help me? What should I do with this? So I started just going around Brisbane doing contract admin for subbies just to.
Good on you.
And it was just, it's not legal work. It's knowing what to say to the CA on the other end of the phone to get them to pay you. And we're not using any of, we have security of payment compliance, so there's all of that. And we are doing our contract admin in accordance with the contract. But what happens is the subby knows, the builder knows the moment you call them, they're not dealing with the average subby. This person knows what they're doing. They know what the Security Payment Act is. And when you can logic through them, well, actually, you're not allowed to do that. Did you guys know that you're not allowed to do that? And you do it in a really endearing way. You can build relationships with these people. They start to trust you more. And, it can be a harmonious thing. So Tricks of Your Trade started organically. People just started ringing me. And at one point, I had too many people to work for to be on the wages. So I just had to get an ABN. And there was no master plan. But I'm so grateful that it's happened because, you know how they say, like, if you go to work every day and you love what you do, it's a calling. It's not a job.
Yeah, that's right. Confucius. Yep.
That's exactly what it is for me. It's just like my husband says to me, if you ever stop doing this, we need to get you a different phone number because you'll just keep answering their questions.
Yeah, exactly. I think from my point of view, first of all, thank you, because there's not many people that I know would do that. And I think subbies, I'm just rewinding a bit. When I come in this industry, it was built on relationships. I mean, back in the early 90s, I was fortunate to work in the construction industry in the UK, and quite definitely from the age of 17 to 20, I think I should have lost my job about 4 times because I was a bit of a tearaway. But it was the older and wiser heads that, saw something in me to keep me on track. And I always try and pass that down to other people in the industry. And that's what I love about construction. There is that family, still that family feel about construction. However, I often think now, I visualize a Voldemort character writing these contracts, and collaboration just means a vice in which they can pass down the risk from the head contract to the lifeblood of the industry that actually is making everyone's money, really. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, when we look at our industry, employs 1.2 million people, 12% are female, less than 3% of female roles on site, but that's just some stats. And a little story that I always visualize that doesn't make any sense to me, I'll just tell a little story. There's these 3 beggars. One's a principal contractor, one's the subcontractor, and one's a supply chain. So they've gone out begging for the day. One's got a piece of meat, one's got some vegetables, and one's got some spices. They come back in the cave at night, and the first beggar we'll call the PC, he thinks, or she thinks, I'll keep my piece of meat. I'll just drop a pebble in the pot because it's too dark. They won't know. And I'll eat their vegetable and spices, and then I'll eat the meat later. Unbeknownst to the other participants in the cave, they've all got the same idea. So they all drop a pebble in the pot and they just sit there eating the boiled water quietly in the corner. And that's kind of conjures to me the industry dynamics we've got at the moment, because everybody's protecting their own risk. So some jobs, they'll get the meat and the other 2 will get the boiling water. Some jobs, the PC loses very rarely, and the other 2 are left with, their take of the share of the contract. So it does concern me, and I'm really glad that we're talking today. And I did use a play on words, contract killers. What clauses do you currently see themes as in our industry that really catch out builders, subbies, the tier 3, the smaller companies that have not got that contract resilience? What can you share with us on that point, Michelle?
Yeah, so it's so difficult for me to condense it down to a handful of clauses to give you an example, because I've got a 20-page review checklist on my website that you can buy for $100. So it's like there are and it depends on the contract as well and the context in which you're doing the job. So one of the things I love to tell subbies is the things that you need to change in your contract. Yes, a lawyer can give you a list of things that are not in your best interests with legal jargon, but 90% of the things that go wrong will be not because of the clauses in the contract, it'll be because of the circumstances of what unfolds on site. And you already know intimately your trade what's likely to go wrong because you've priced the job, so you've measured the drawings or you've been through the tender process, you understand the site, you know the builder, hopefully, and there's ways subbies can do free due diligence on their builder and it's easy. It's like once you show them, they're like, whoa, I didn't know that I could do that. So like, the 80-20 rule when you go, well, look, 80% of your results will come from 20% of what you do. Well, that's the 20% the subby does while they're pricing the job. That will keep you out of trouble. And also there's that whole starting work on site without signing a contract. And people think, oh, well, if I start before I sign, then I can say no to those clauses. Well, no, what happens is you sink money and resources into the job and then the builder holds your payment to ransom until you sign the contract. So you give away your leverage in that moment. But look, some of the the biggest one that I have a bugbear with at the moment, and this is not just really at the moment, this has been a 10-year problem, is the liquidated damages. And everyone says, oh, they never get used. And then I have the classic one with CAs who say to me, oh, it's not that easy to actually get them. We've got to prove causation, all this stuff. I'm like, actually, and I'm not going to tell them they're wrong because I don't want to educate them. They don't know what they're talking about. But if you have a contract with liquidated damages and then you have head contract liquidated damages and then you have milestones where your liquidated damages are tied to your milestones, you can end up with double the liquidated damages compounding on every milestone that's missed. That makes my skin crawl. And unfortunately, the way the courts are looking at that at the moment is that if you are a business and you enter into a contract with another business, you're doing what's called a contract in trade and commerce, which means you've got your big boy shoes on and you're in business and you need to pull up your socks and operate like a professional outfit. And the courts have said if you enter into a contract with overly onerous contract terms or really, even if they're absurd, we do not have the authority to overturn those clauses just because you think they're unfair now. Unless they were illegal from the outset or they're unenforceable for some other reason. So there are defenses to that sort of thing sometimes, but they're very, very limited. The best defense you can have to liquidated damages is capping them. And if you can cap them at no more than your retention amount, like just try and do that at least. And try and get the rate down per day. I always cross out the milestone liquidated damages, and the head contract liquidated damages is an absurdity to me because your liquidated damages is supposed to be a genuine pre-estimate of the cost you will incur if you're late.
Yes,
or if somebody's late. So why then would you have a line item for head contracts?
Exactly.
So that's one of my biggest bugbears, and it's the one trick pony the builders always use, or the contract, even, the civil contractors always go to, is the liquidated damages. And then you always see them materialise in different ways as well, particularly with the civil contractors who are working on highways. And if there's any kind of toll road involved, you'll see lane closure charges. So anything. One of the things I love to control F when looking through a contract is just a dollar sign. Like find out where the money is and the percentage sign as well, because it'll identify anywhere where they're liquidating amounts or putting in a formula for an amount. So liquidated damages is huge. Now, the other two things that I think are huge are actually what's not written in your contract. It's not something that's in there that you need to cross out. It's actually what's not in there. And that is, the first one is the ability for you to terminate the subcontract if the builder's in breach.
Right.
And it needs to be not a very long process. Like it needs to be like a 2-week process at maximum. At the moment, the Australian standard contracts have a 7-day show cause notice period and then a 28-day to remedy the breach for the main contractor. So what's happening is these builders who are clearly trading insolvent, they're not paying on time. The subbies take a week or so to work out how to suspend work. They suspend work. Then 2 or 3 weeks later, when the builder can finally pay, they get paid and everyone has to go back. And you're on the carousel, you can't get off it. So you need to have a clause in there that says if they don't pay you on time more than twice, or a much shorter show cause notice if the builder's in breach, so that you can actually get out of this contract. It's so disheartening to be at a point with the industry where, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but in some instances, I can't wait for these builders to go broke, because the money they are costing these subbies in the lead up to going broke is more than these subbies would be short paid if they just got out of the job, because the longer they're on the hook, the more retention's being accrued. All these things are happening. And so it's a really difficult situation. The other thing that's probably not in your contract that you need to have in your contract is the ability to decline a variation.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
the contractor must. I can instruct you. Let's say you're building a wall. I can instruct you to the codes come home, and you have to comply with it. It's like, what's going on? Yeah,
and the ones with mega hair on them say it doesn't matter if we haven't worked out what the price is. You're being paid. You have to comply with my direction, and we'll work it out later. And the contractor can, in their absolute discretion, apply reasonable rates.
Yes.
And you just go, come on.
Oh, come on. Yeah, what's reasonable?
Yes. So, and the piggyback on that one is you always need to be looking in your schedule at what your margin on variations is, because the Australian standard contract will default to 5% in a lot of instances, and it includes profit and overheads. So it'll be attendance, overheads, and profit. And anyone who can do basic maths knows that gross 5% profit, you're subsidising every single variation you do. So huge issue. And we saw that. So we saw that one really cut at the end of COVID, when material price increases started going through the roof, and principals like landowners went, we'll never get a price like this again. Let's direct a variation to do a whole nother building. And so they direct the builder to do it under their contract, and the builder was on a fixed price with a fixed margin rate and had to do it.
And then comply to the clause,
They go to the subbies and they go, well, you're on a square metre rate and you get 5% margin including attendance, and they have a schedule of rates that's 2 years old in the back of the contract where they're paying chippies $45 an hour. And you go, you're stuck under contract until they let you out of it, and you cannot decline a variation.
I'm so glad you've shined a light into that instance, because I think also, well, not everyone, but most people say, okay, there's 1,200 construction firms gone broke, and, all these people and blah, blah, blah. And until you actually understand the hidden mechanics behind the industry, what's actually going on. And before I go on, I apologize. My video is turned off due to bandwidth. I have got a face for radio, but Michelle very kindly has left her video on because she's going to be using this later on. But apologies if I'm not camera shy, but But getting back to the industry, we see the top line numbers, and like you, Michelle, I love this industry, and I see the people who are driving past me at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning, the tradies and the small businesses that are out to just feed the family. And I think sometimes they get a bad rap. Oh yeah, I got a plumber out and it cost me a fortune. But at the end of the day, this is such an important pillar of our community and country and economy that I wanted to really talk to you about this, because they only see the tip of the iceberg with the headline numbers. But really, if we can start to educate more, like you are doing a great job doing with tricks of the trade, I'm really happy about that. Really, I am. And if we start to educate ourselves on, hang on, how do I insulate myself against these going forward, rather than looking at the new 400 series cruiser, I'm not saying everyone does, but rather than looking at the new ute, do I actually get some more commercial resilience that's going to not only protect me, but get a good return on investment? Because obviously the collaboration style of contracting is diminishing at the moment because everyone's fencing their risk and just pushing that down as much as they can to the engine room, so to speak.
Yeah.
I've seen some clauses in there that the contractor can, at its discretion, without notice or without cause, get rid of anybody off site. I'm like, that's just ethically, morally, and illegally not right. I mean, someone could have a bad day and wipe out half your crew.
Yeah, and you read the Builder's Code of Conduct and it flies in the face of that.
Oh, yeah. It's like, yeah. I also think that, anybody listening to this podcast, I really want you to get in contact with Michelle. I don't want to overload Michelle, but I think what Michelle is trying to do and doing is educating our industry, not from a lawyer's point of view, but she's got that legal acumen. But I can tell the way that Michelle's going about this, she really cares about what she's doing, and the service she's providing to our beloved industry is needed in a time where we're pushing for more collaborative way of working, like John Davis and a few people at the higher end of the scale, Disrupt or Die, the document that he wrote. He's on the podcast later on in the month. However, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to, when you get to the negotiating table, is to get your ducks in a row and understand your contract and start to engage people like Michelle, because really, when the contract's signed and the ink's dried, it's all over. And like Michelle says, no one's really going to come in to your aid. And if you're going legal, it's going to be really expensive and money that you've not got because you either can't pay your subbies, and the cash flow is king. What other messages, Michelle, do you think we can give to our industry in this regard?
Yeah, look, that's been a real something I've been thinking about a lot at night lately, because I've had a lot of calls from panicked subbies whose builders have gone broke. Yeah. And, I said earlier that some of these builders, I just can't wait for them to go broke because the carnage is worse than the actual what's going to happen afterwards. And it's easy for me to say that because I've worked for so many clients whose builders have gone broke, who we've negotiated with the principal. They've ended up being paid more. So they've been paid overs to finish the job. They end up with a relationship with a new client they never had. And they got rid of this toxic relationship with this builder who was trading insolvent. And so I've sort of got the hindsight that they haven't yet even experienced. And it's easy for me to say because it's not my money, but when these subbies are looking down the barrel of, I may not ever see this couple of $100,000 or however much it is, it's always a substantial amount of money for subbies. And they're thinking, well, what do I do? Do I call the liquidator? How do I get to the front line? Well, 9 times out of 10, everything you needed to do, it's too late to do that now. Yes. There are some exceptions. If you've got a subcontractor's charge on foot, if you've got a judgment debt, if you've got an adjudicator's decision and you can give a payment withholding request, some of those things can still be done after a liquidator is appointed. But there's special laws in Australia that protect companies in liquidation from being sued. So if you go to your lawyer, if you come to me at the law firm, I've got 1 or 2 things I can do for you. And 9 times out of 10, I say to them, this will cost you this much money. This is how much you're chasing. I'm really sorry, but that's not commercial. Now, as a solicitor, I have a legal obligation to make sure I give you full and frank advice, right? Yes. If you come to Michelle at Tricks of Your Trade rather than the law firm and say, what commercial leverage do I have to get paid from someone? And at the end of the day, you've got a principal who needs their building built or their job done, and you've got a subby who has intimate knowledge of the job, has already placed orders for materials, has already sunk labour into the job, is going to be so grateful to be paid if they're paid. And that principal is going to have to pay somebody overs because the builder's gone. So it's about actually identifying what leverage you have in that situation. So how dependent is the principal on you? And not dependency in a bad way, but what unique selling points do you have? Do you have continuity of warranties? Is there a long lead time on an item that you've got? All those types of things lead into dependency, particularly if you've been paid a big deposit. It's going to be attractive for the principal to go, oh, the builder paid you a deposit. That way you should be owed less because the principal's money paid to the builder has been passed on to the person it needed to be passed on to. So identifying what kind of dependency there is there.
Yeah.
Have a look at the time advantage.
Yes.
Principals whose jobs are stopped, time is literally money. They've usually got a bank involved with the QS who's going to value the work and go, we can't sell this asset. It has to be finished to be sold. And every single month that we can't keep going with this job, this principal's paying interest on the repayments. So it's a situation of, if you can offer a time advantage to this principal, you're going to have some leverage. And then look at the relationships as well. So this is one that a lot of people don't realise. When you're dealing with a building company that's not paying you, you're dealing with staff who will, if the builder goes broke, it's not the staff usually who are stopping you from being paid. There's usually the builder's house is on fire.
Yeah.
And these staff have only got so many tricks in their book. And if they really like you, like I used to love my subbies and I used to look out for them. My boss used to say to me, Michelle, are you forgetting who you're working for?
Yeah.
And that's the type of stuff that happens for builders in financial distress. But if you can build a relationship with those staffers, you need to preserve that relationship through not being paid. And this is what sucks most about being the subby in this situation, is you have to be the bigger person.
Yes, of course.
You're short paid, you're on site being treated like poo because you're at the bottom of the contractual chain, and you still have to suck it up to be the bigger person and keep you cool in this situation. The way to do it is to have really good contract admin so that it's procedural. You're at arm's length. They're just getting your forms. It's not anything personal. You can have a gatekeeper person. So just like the builder has the accounts lady who gives you all the bullshit reasons you're not being paid, you get one of those too, so that person can be like, you can play good cop, bad cop. And then you need to preserve the relationships with the staffers, because this amazing phenomena happens with builders going broke is the staff get a hero complex and they start saying to the principal, well, I can help you finish your job. And they all get promotions to project managers for developers because they're all sick of working for builders that don't have money. And a lot of them will go out and get their own builder's license as well. So it's a really interesting thing, because you will end up, you don't want to be burning those staffers in the building company who are in a crappy situation they can't fix for you, and then finding out in 6 months' time that you're still going to be accountable to that person. And the converse can happen as well, where when the builder's going broke and the ship's going down, the staff will jump ship. And if you've got deals, handshake deals with those people because you did variations on a handshake, you'll never, never, never get that money. That's why your contract admin needs to be there for you. But somebody once said to me when I first started in the industry, like, your career's a marathon. You might have a job for a period of time, but this is the thing about the construction industry is that you'll always see people popping up for different companies, and
absolutely,
you have to separate the person from the problem.
Exactly. I mean, one day the boss on site, the next person who was working for the boss. And one of the things that I always try and imbue into the people I work with is, we might be great at building roads and building houses, but how good are we at building relationships? That is the key quintessential ingredient of not only being human, but also being a really good contractor. It's about removing your ego and your wants, putting yourself in the position of the other person on the other phone and saying, hang on, although I might be in the situation, he or she has got a job to do as well. And also a message that is really important. You might have the best relationships in the world with your client. However, there's one relationship that always exists, is the contract. That relationship needs to be paid attention to before you sign, because that's a document that you'll dust off halfway through the job and you'll go, oh crap, actually time bars. I've missed my time bars. Oh, that'd be all right. Should be right, mate. No, it won't. The contract admin function not only is having a good relationship, but is also administering the contract. It's keeping your company health, that injection, that shot in the arm. Like I said before, if you're driving around a cruiser and you're winging it, hoping that you're just going to get your variations and you mount a one-on-one job, but your internal powerhouse is the contract admin. And like Michelle says, the relationship of the other person in the line who's actually paying you. So I think that's forgotten about in some companies. and it's missed. And you see these stellar companies that go from zero to hero and back to bust because they've had a few quick wins and people want to take them on the journey. But then they go into this arena where it is a dog-eat-dog world, I'm afraid. And if you've not got your contractual smarts about you, and the people is a revolving door, you're absolutely right. You don't have the same people you had a relationship with on the next job, and they might be your boss's boss next time, or they might be. So that is a really good point, Michelle, and I've seen it time and time again. Look, we really have to pay attention to this. It is so important. I don't like looking at the news, seeing contractors going bust. And I think talking to Michelle today up to now has made me realize that I think you've got to take your medicine yourselves as well, contractors. It's not all about the industry and, materials. If you have got a good, resilient business and you're approaching contracting in a professional and polished way, then you will be looking at your risk and opportunities of the clients. You do your due diligence that you mentioned before, Michelle. Are they solvent? Do they pay on time? Have they got a history of being aggressive or contractually draconian? Like the Voldemort I said before. But I also would like to just take a pause for people in our industry and the jobs that you're on now. And if it's going sideways or if it's going down, as we say, the shitter, what could you have done? Have a look at yourself. What could you have done better? How much more forward planning would it have been better to go, yeah, I can start next week. However, I need to review the contract. I need to look at my supply chain. It's the vernacular that you use and giving yourself that headspace. And I know they're going to say, oh, Paul, but I've got to keep my workers going. Yeah, but sometimes it's cheaper to park them up for a week and not expose yourself to this environment where, yeah, you've got to keep the money coming in and cash flow's king. However, what appetite have you got for risk and what appetite have you got for blind risk? Because unfortunately, the legal route, when it's over, it's over. And I've seen it. I've been involved. I've been at all levels of management, big tier 1 companies down to, not even tier 3 companies. And I've worked for tier 3 companies that are more contractually savvy and have better relationships than the tier 1s, because it gets very clinical and cold. And, these big companies, not all of them, but some of them, people revolve through companies and they tend to attract the same subbies tendering for the work legally and ethically. So pay attention to what Michelle is talking about. It really is so important that the due diligence up front. One of my bosses used to say, hire slowly and fire quickly. So maybe contract slowly. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Contract a bit slower and don't look at the shiny toys in the showroom and put that money into where it's going to give you a real return on investment in your future.
Yeah, you don't want to have these big highs and these big lows. The consistency is key. And what you were talking about before with the subbies cruising around in their fancy cars, there's this running joke that I have with some of my subbies the tradies who go out, so finish your apprenticeship, get an ABN, get a ute, get your personalised plates, like straight away. And it's almost like if you're going to have a business of your own and you want to name your business ABC Plastering or whatever it is, personalised plates straight away. That means you've got a business if your plates are your company. And I'm just going, like, guys, what you first need is to make sure you're properly licensed, that you know what contracts you're signing, that you're actually legally doing the work, that your business structure's right.
Exactly. And build from within.
But they'll go and pay $2,500 for personalised plates, and it just drives me nuts.
Yeah, no, it's the wrong focus. Yeah, it is. Look, I mean, I've come from the tools, and I'll just say it straight. There's a level of immaturity that you just can't put an old head on young shoulders, and experience is a cruel thing. It gives you the experience first and the answer at the end. So these podcasts and Michelle's company and her vision for helping is born about of the pain and of what experience brings. So whether you're a young, mid or experienced subby, it doesn't mean that you're going to get through. And this is a message that in this boom and bust industry that we live in, And I talk about a boom economy. We can't build enough houses, and we've got another 1 million people coming into the country to try and inject into the economy. We've got labour shortages. We've got people that are swapping yellow vests to different companies, chasing the dollar. I think before you look at expansion, you got to look at, contracting, contract admin. The clue's in the word. Contract admin, contracting. There's a similar word through all that. It slaps you in the face.
Yeah, so many subbies say to me, I'm just going to cancel this job now. And do you guys understand what a contract is? Like, it's a legally binding promise. You have committed. What is the point in signing a contract if you're not bound to it, right?
Exactly.
So I'll give you an example, Paul. I'm getting wiser at this stuff, and I was one of those naive crusaders. When I came out of that building company, my soul was destroyed, and I was so passionate about helping subbies that subbies took advantage of me for a while. I used to do work for free all the time, right?
Yeah.
And there was a particular subby who came to me and needed some help, and I said to him, "Look, I'm not a lawyer. You need to get a lawyer to help you with this."
Yes.
This is probably 5 years ago, I think.
Okay.
And he went to a law firm, and the law firm charged him $800 an hour, and they cocked it up monumentally. Like, this guy lost 80 grand in the first stoush, and then he lost the money he was owed, which was about 150 as well. And he just said, "I just give up, Michelle, the system's broken. Like, I just give up," right? I lost so much sleep over that because I knew how to help that guy, but I didn't break the law because I'm a sensible Susan and I do exactly what I'm. So I sent him to someone who was allowed to give him the advice, gave him different advice, and they cocked it up. Anyway, so I worried about that until last year. I went to an awards ceremony, and that guy was at the table with me, and he was bragging about how he just bought a $250,000 boat. And he was carrying on, and there were other people at the same table who had been seriously affected with the material price increases, who had not made any money, who I'd also had as clients that year. And I sat back and went, wow, that's a real slap in the face for me to realise that this guy's still living fast and loose. He doesn't do any of his contract admin, and he's made the conscious decision. He says to me, "I don't believe in the system anyway. So I'm just going to do it the way I'm going to do it. And if we come a guts, we'll come a gutser." And on the flip side, I had another subby who about 5 years ago went into liquidation. And I have chats with him still. I did a very early podcast with him on my podcast. I think it's episode 8.
I'll chat that out.
He was saying to me after he went broke, he said to me, "Do you know what? If you don't do your contract admin, it's the same thing as driving down the highway at 120k with no seatbelt on. If you get in an accident, you're not surviving. And if you do survive, you're bloody lucky. And 9 times out of 10, you might make it there and not get killed." He said, "But the biggest problem is the subbies in the industry think the worst thing that can happen is they'll get a speeding ticket or they'll get fined by the cops for not wearing the seatbelt, right?" So in their minds, they're going, "Oh, this is a monetary penalty." No. This is business sinkers. This is when you sent me the request to have the podcast. Let's call it contract killers. I'm like, no, let's call it business killers.
Business killers,
That's the gravity of what you're doing. And if you want to be a subby who is turning over multi-million dollars a year, you need to pull up your socks. You're playing in the sandpit with the big dogs, and you need to learn how to actually be a business person. So, you don't muck around with your bookkeeping and your tax returns. You go and get professional advice with those things. And you understand the value in actually getting an outcome. So there's like a return on investment for that stuff. When you guys think, so many subbies say to me, I want an accountant that's just the right kind of grey, like just on the line for me, that will get me the most money back but make sure I don't get in trouble. That's the thing, that's the beauty of when you fuse together legal compliance underpinnings with commercial leverage. And I talk about it, and I sound like a total egomaniac saying this, but when you come up through the ranks as a client side PM, and then you go work for a commercial builder as a builder's CA, I'm a construction adjudicator. So when these things go bad, I read the submissions and have to decide whether the person gets paid. So I intimately understand the framework that these people have to comply with. It's like playing cards from every side of the table, and you know what the other person's hand is in all the different scenarios. So
Of course.
you almost can predict what everyone's going to do. Sometimes I feel like I've had a dream, or there's like deja vu, because it's so predictable sometimes. And I just want to share that with people, because it's not, when you have walked in the shoes and you understand the decision tree of the builder who's in financial distress.
Yeah.
I'm not an oracle. It's just I've been in that situation. I can tell you what they're going to do. And there's things we can put in place. But if you don't get any help, it doesn't have to be me. If you don't get any help, you're just going to be a sitting duck. Every single thing you do will be reactive, and you'll cruise down the highway at 1,000,000 miles an hour, probably just fine for the next 10 years. But one day when you have an accident, you might lose both legs.
Yeah.
And that's...
No, great analogy. I mean, I think definitely we've got to increase our awareness that it's not just about fast living and fast boat. You're affecting people's lives, the financial lives. Now, just gather my thoughts here, because I see the good, the bad, the ugly of the industry as well. I've come up at all levels. And what concerns me the most is that I've got no problem with anybody being successful. I love successful businesses. I love the pauper to prince story, and you can see someone's been successful and they've worked their way up, and good on you. Good on you for doing that. What I don't like is that the fast and loose subcontractor or contractor or builder who is having a socio-economic impact by driving at speed or drunk driving, analogy, through the industry, just causing carnage. Or I'll pay them late because I know if I pay them late, they might go bump anyway, and they won't get the money anyway. It still happens. And I just think, there's a kind of a construction karma that people don't understand. It's a very small industry. So unless you've got an exit strategy that you're never going to work in construction again, believe you me, it will come back to bite you. But I also say the awareness has to be increased. Having good commercial acumen, having good commercial contracts, not only is it the right thing to do, however, it does insulate the industry against this boom and bust contracting. There's so much work out there, and it can be done so diligently and so easily contracted out. I mean, the builder wants you, or the tier one civil construction company wants you to work. Without you, they've got nothing. They've not got the gear. They've not got the expertise. They've got the management. Very few companies Australia now own their own equipment and operate their own equipment. All the big ones have gone to project management and ring fencing the risk and getting the subcontracts on board. So they need you as much as we need them. So why would you lead with the chin, knowing that you lead with the chin? If you're knowing that you lead with the chin, you're an idiot. Why are you doing that? If you don't know you're leading with the chin, you need to get advice, and you need to get that commercial resilience. And I repeat myself a lot. Not only does it help your business and the relationships, it helps the industry, because more boom and bust is just a race to the bottom. Because all the contracting world does then is that you set a precedent for contracting, an unconscious precedent that this is accepted. And I bet a large portion of people, when they read contracts, it's just alien to them, the language, and they just don't understand the risks. They don't understand what rights to offset means. That's another cracking one, rights to offset.
Yeah, so they call them that on purpose. That's there just
exactly.
People up.
So rights to offset, I'll stop for a minute. So let's say you're working for ABC Contracting in Queensland, and you've got 3 of the projects, 2 in Western Australia and 1 in New South Wales, and they're all worth $1 million each, right? If both projects in the States are doing fine, but this one project isn't doing fine, the rights to offset is they can take money off the other projects owing to you, and people are signing up to this.
Yeah, so, cross-contract set-offs so that...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell by your face. It's a common twitch.
It's in the Australian Standard.
I did not know that.
It's called the other money's due clause. And I mean, this is the thing, is you look at Standards Australia and you think, they're very, and I'm not making accusations to say that they're not impartial, but that is a reflection of who their customer is.
Wow.
And, you know, those standards were designed to be sold to builders, not to subbies. And the other money's due clause is in the Australian standard contracts unamended. So do you know 90% of my learned colleagues, other lawyers, will say to you,
Yeah.
that's fair, that's in the unamended. Well, I'm telling you that
Yeah.
there is this thing called blue collar discrimination,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
is the undercurrents of it are reflected in our contracts, and they're reflected in our contracting methods.
Yeah.
A lot of people will say, well, that all stemmed from personal injury claims,
Mm-hmm.
and passing, it made sense to get
Yeah.
people off the payroll, right?
Right. Okay.
And for a little while, you were able to pass the risk down
Mm-hmm.
of a personal injury claim if you had the separation of companies, and then there's insurers involved who cover insurance for those things.
Yes, of course.
But now the other legislation has caught up with Fair Work and classifying what an ABN worker is and having to have bona fide subcontracts and things like that. So this is the thing, is the subbies, it's such a juxtaposition, or it's such a dichotomy, that these subbies are tradespeople who work with their hands, who oftentimes will have taken an apprenticeship rather than a finished school.
Yeah.
Certainly, most of them have not been to uni to do a business degree. And then they come out and they are not only managing contracts with people, with their clients up the chain, they also have subcontracts with people down the chain. They've got logistics, they've got resourcing, they've got bookkeeping, they've got marketing. Every single aspect of what needs to be done in a business, a subby has to do it. And if it's anything like my business, unless I do it, it doesn't get done,
exactly.
right? So you have to know enough about everything to know it's okay. And this is one of the areas where I'm guilty of this. I bought a car once, didn't read the contract, and just went, whatever. You know, like everyone, people buy cars all the time.
Like all the terms and conditions that you just click yes at the bottom on an app or something. Yeah, yeah.
Your Telstra agreement with your mobile phone, and then how many of you have got $4,000 bills when you found out that what you signed up to wasn't what you thought you got? And you know, that was a classic for everyone in the year 2000. But we've all wisened up a bit now, and we mitigate our risk by just getting prepaid SIM cards. And so the thing is that you can actually quarantine your risk by deciding what type of contracts you enter into, who you do work with, all of those types of things. But the subbies have got, I believe, the hardest job, because the builders, they pass the risk down and then they have the retention if anything goes bad with the subby, plus they have the ability to terminate for convenience. And the termination for convenience clauses, you'll see almost every single time there's a termination for convenience clause, it will list the things that the subby gets paid for if it happens. They all sound really good. It all sounds reasonable. Retention's not on there, right?
Good point.
I have seen the big shiny builders, the really popular big shiny builders everyone wants to work for. I have seen them do this a number of times, where they will get a structures trade, get them like a concreter, they'll get them to top out, and all the external works, they just terminate them for convenience, take 5% of their contract sum as retention, which is held 10% of every progress claim up to 5%. So the full 5% of the contract sum was accrued, even though they just terminate at that date. So it's more than 5% proportionately to how much work they'd carried out at the date of termination, and they never pay the retention. And that's because the retention at the date of termination was never due and payable under the contract, because they never reached practical completion. And this is a go-to trick that I've seen the very popular big shiny builders do. And I've been in contract negotiations with them where they go, wow, I've never heard of that before. I'm like, oh, well, that's really funny, because that was actually you guys who did this. And if you look up a lot of the case law, even if you just Google your builder, or if you go onto the court's website, there's a website that you can go to. It's www.lawcite, LAWCITE.org, I think it is.
Okay.
But just Google lawcite, CITE, not SITE.
Yep.
And type in your builder's name in the party and then hit search. And you will probably fall off your chair. Half of the case law that exists with the legal precedents around whether or not they can have liquidated damages, I would be surprised if you're not working for that builder or have worked for that builder in the past.
Wow. I'll put that link on the bottom of the podcast. That is a really sharky way of going about business. I mean, so basically the subby has got a practical completion release date for his or her retention. He gets terminated for convenience, and let's say it's 50 grand. That 50 grand contractually is not owing to that subcontractor because they've not reached practical completion.
No way to get it back. And that's something you need to be putting into your contract reviews, because when you do your contract review, the CA is very happy at the time and thinks they're a really good bloke, and they will almost always give us that departure. So the way I do it is I cross out the termination for convenience clause, and they go, oh, we can't have that. We can't have that crossed out. We just can't. They can't tell you why they can't, but they'll tell you they can't. And so you go, okay, all right, well, how about as a compromise, we at least just put our retention here? Because, I mean, it's only fair that if we get our contract terminated for convenience, we should get our retention back. And that will be your saving grace. But you need to say there a full release of all retentions at the date of termination, regardless of whether or not they're paid, due and payable. And I've never had that knocked back when we do a contract review, but I have seen it used on subbies. And the guy who I did the podcast with on episode 8 of the Tricks of Your Trade podcast, that happened to him.
Wow.
And he also was in a situation where he had 15 jobs with the one builder and that cross-contract set-off clause. He had money cross-contract set-off. He had 3 builders go broke on him. He didn't have any trade credit insurance. One of the builders that went broke still owed him 170 grand, but the liquidator came after him for a preference payment because he entered into a payment plan with that particular builder. So just to backtrack for people listening, a preference payment is when your builder goes broke, and any company who goes broke, when a liquidator is appointed, they have to look 6 months back from the date the liquidator was appointed and see what payments were made to people. And this is to keep the directors honest, to make sure they weren't giving their brother or their sister any money just before they went broke. And they have to check to see if there were any preference payments. So one of the criteria for a preference payment, this is the most common one that subbies get caught on, is if you had any reasonable knowledge your builder was struggling financially. So because this subby had entered into a payment plan with that builder, he had knowledge and he received payments after that. And it was more than 6 figures that he had to pay back to the liquidator. So you've got the perfect storm of fast and this is the sad thing, is this particular guy was not fast and loose. He was actually a very good operator. He had a very profitable business for a very long time. He was the go-to guy for his trade, and just such a nice human being. And then he told the story of, well, I went around and I did the right thing and I told them all face to face that we were going to go broke. And he said, I hadn't even got back to the office, not even half an hour later, and I came back to emails, we've shut up site, you're not having your plant and equipment back. They basically just locked everything down and just went to war with him, and then wouldn't take his call. It's been 5 years now, and those same staff that he thought he had those relationships with still ghost him. And it's funny because I was a very cynical, when I left being a contracts administrator, I was so cynical about relationships. Almost every single client who came to me, I would say to them, your relationships are not real. You just need to know that. You cannot rely on your relationships. And it took a little bit of time for me to wisen up and realise that if it could be so influential on me that I went and started a business to help subbies, that there are other people out there. And part of that journey was people like you who contact me on LinkedIn. And I have so many builders, CAs, PMs, construction managers who will message me confidentially and dob on their builder for doing something dodgy, because their values are the same as mine. And you will know yourself, like, you don't get into the construction industry because you want to have fights. You get into the industry because you want to build iconic projects.
Of course.
We have like big dreams of being part of really cool projects.
Of course.
It was that same thing when I was back with government. I was giving people community facilities. It was a really great feeling. So if you have somebody who was inspired to become a construction industry professional because they want to build iconic projects, and then suddenly you put them in a role where they have to rip people off day in and day out. Our generation of people are too educated to put up with that anymore. The things have changed, and the way that sort of the hierarchy and the discipline, and I mean, you and I having an open conversation on a podcast about construction issues like this, and I never play the female card, but you know, you said yourself when you first reached out to me, it's rare to see so many women in your role doing what you're doing. And I made a concerted decision. And Paul, can I tell you, part of the reason that I do this with confidence is because no subby ever discriminated against me.
Good.
The builders did. And
yeah.
But no subby was ever not a good bloke to me.
Yeah,
and
good. That's really good.
That's the thing is, I think you hit the nail on the head early on, is we've got family businesses. If we're a subcontracting business, almost always there's a family.
Yes.
If you've got a builder, there can be private shareholders, it can be silent directors, it can be a faceless corporation. You may not, but it's how often does the subby have Mr. Builder's phone number or Mrs. Builder's phone number?
Yeah.
They've got the phone number of a staffer.
That's right, yeah.
But if you're dealing with a subby, 9 times out of 10, you're dealing with the person whose business it is.
Yeah, he or she still got vomit on his shoulder from the kids in the morning. And, you know, yeah. When I came in the industry, it was very handshake and reputational. And now that's a utopian view. It's almost a dream. I do have clients that are like that. They're very few and far between, but we do have a handful of clients in the industry I work in that I just know I can contact the CEO. He owns the business. We can have a conversation. You know, very rarely that it happens, but you're right. When you're dealing with private equity companies and companies that are huge, it's almost a faceless organism. It's like, it reminds me of I'm a big John Steinbeck fan, and The Grapes of Wrath, if anybody's ever read that book. And there's a little section there where the farmers are getting their houses taken off them in the Depression, and these tractors, these dozers sent by the banks have got no conscience, and they're getting paid more to destroy the houses than the farmers are to keep the property, because the banks are taking the land off them. And it always reminds me of that thread in this industry, this faceless, unconscious, money-driven community of wanting the pound of flesh. And the alternative to that is, I just really wish that some companies would understand that the death of the subcontractor is the death of yourselves, you know, and vice versa. And, you know, there's a utopian vision of collaboration, developing an ecosystem with partners and suppliers and having those relationships and early engagement, and all that's fine and it's great. However, one of the founding pillars of that is the contract. You know, you could have the best relationship in the world, and I know I'm conscious of time and keeping your time, Michelle. I apologize. I don't want to rattle on too long. However, this contract killers episode, it is what it means. It's not a provocative subtitle. I mean, the contract can either be your best friend or your worst enemy. And if you don't pay attention to building that relationship I spoke about, this unconscious thing that's just 146 pages long, that doesn't care. It's not got a conscience. It doesn't care if your business for 30 years and your kids and all that are going to go hungry. So why would you not give that attention to something that doesn't care about you in that kind of broad context? It's got no conscious view of life. But the conscious inputs are you. You've got to make it conscious. You've got to make that document serve you and protect you and share that level of risk, but don't just go in, scribble on the bottom line and hope it's all going to be good. Because like Michelle said, 90% of the issues is the underside of the iceberg that we don't see and we don't know. There's what's going to be the Titanic event of your business. You're going to hit that and you're going to come hoping to recover and rescue your family's passed down generational business, and your number plate on your ute ain't going to save you.
I would add to that too, Paul, a lot of subbies, and this is the thing, is so many people when they have a first call with me will say to me, oh, I feel so depressed about that now. Like, I don't think I'm doing anything well, right? But the thing is, they're already doing all of these things they need to do with the contract, because that's how they do business. So you're already asking to be paid for variations. You're just asking at the wrong time. And you might not be asking in writing. You know, all of these things that you would do if you were going to do things the very best way, you're already doing it. And if you're not doing it, you're probably leaving money on the table, because I know myself, if you don't record or keep track of what you actually do, it just disappears, it disintegrates, and you never ever get paid for it. So it's it doesn't have to be an overwhelming thing, and a systematic approach will make it so that it's just done, it's just covered. You don't have to think about it. It's not an emotional thing like you're talking all about. The contract's not out to get you. Contract doesn't have a life of its own. But neither does the admin, right? And
that's right,
it's just the same as keeping your invoices for your bookkeeper. You just need to nest the evidence. And what happens is nothing happens. What happens if you do your admin properly is that nothing happens. And you get put to the bottom of a pile of people to pick on. And inevitably you'll be going, oh, Michelle, like, this is so much effort. Like, admin heavy, what for? Like, nothing ever goes wrong. We've been fine for years. And you know what? It's a statistical likelihood if you're in business based on the number of transactions. Somebody who's really good at maths can work this out and one day tell me what the answer is. I don't know if it's 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 100. I think it's actually different based on the contract, the builder, and what the job involves and how prepared you are to do your admin. But it's a statistical likelihood that you will come a gutser. Based on the number of transactions. And if you're the kind of subby who does 100 $30,000 contracts every year, because you do a small portion of bespoke work, you're running the gauntlet more times than the subby who is doing 2 multi-million-dollar contracts, because the number of transactions will increase the likelihood because the number of variables in play. So many times people will say to me, oh, it's just a $30,000 contract, Michelle. And I'm like, and so you can't just, that is literally so if you want to know what does not make a difference about whether or not you're going to have a dispute, is the number written on the front of the contract. That's the one thing that makes no difference. What makes a difference is whether you read the contract and you understand what's in it. So look, I could go on forever, Paul, and I don't want to sort of be ranty, because I know that I can sound a little bit like the school teacher, like, you should be doing all the right things. But I fully appreciate that from a commercial perspective, it can be a daunting thing to implement an admin person to do this stuff for you. And what I would say is, you don't hesitate to hire a labourer. And you, for a very, very good price, can hire an admin trainee who can be taught how to do all of this stuff. So do you mind if I tell people what our system is?
No, go for it. This is what it's about,
Yeah, so what happened was, I realised that subbies were never going to pay what a builder pays for a contracts administrator. And if you train everyone individually, it costs a bucket load. Like, I'm talking, you almost got to go to uni. So what I've created is what's called the Subbies Toolbox, which has shelf-ready systems and procedures, and it has ongoing support. So 2 days a week, I jump on Zoom, just like you and I are now, and our group of people ask me questions. So you hire an admin person, I'll teach them how to do your contract admin, and then I'm your commercial manager in the background for a very, very affordable fee.
Of course.
And you have access to all those systems that are shelf-ready. They're always up to date. We only work with subcontractors. We don't work with builders. We're here for subbies with bespoke systems for subbies. So that's the way you can get started today, is if you've got, even your bookkeeper can do this stuff. I've got people whose wives who have got young children.
Of course.
Are in the Subbies Toolbox who jump into our system. And it does not have to be an Everest kind of problem for you to go out and solve. The biggest problem subbies have is they don't even know where to start.
Of
and
course.
they feel silly when they read the contract and they ask the builder for something and the builder says, oh, what are you even asking for that for? Well, that, my friend, is called gaslighting. And builders have like expertise in gaslighting subbies and telling them they're stupid and they shouldn't be asking for things. And I can bet you, my firstborn, that if we've been through your contract and I'm telling you to ask for something, you're teaching that CA what it really means, because they never knew in their own contract. So oftentimes we'll get subbies who'll say to me, I just feel like I'm at sea, or I just don't know what to say to the builder when they say this stuff back to me. Can you jump on Zoom with me? So I actually spend a fair bit of time on Zoom with builders, CAs. saying to them, hey, the reason we're asking for this is because we want to deliver A, B, and C, and we're worried that this road's got this problem. And so you can see how it's actually practical stuff. It's not legal jargon we're asking for.
No.
We're saying, hey, this contract requires us to do this, but that's impossible. And perfect example of professional indemnity insurance policy for a plasterer. And so the plasterer has got to provide professional indemnity because they're providing a proprietary system from the Red Book, and the builder wants them to have a professional indemnity insurance policy. Wow. We've been to broker after broker who's saying, we're not giving you that. You're not designing anything.
Exactly.
Like, it's actually illegal for insurers to give insurance policies over nothing. So you can see how these contracts sometimes are, they're one size fits all, but sometimes they set the parties up to fail. And it's not legal jargon we're asking for. We're looking at what is your specific trade relevant context? What do you need to do to comply with the obligations under this contract? And then what are we not willing to accept risk-wise?
Exactly.
And then having a good bloke conversation with this builder, because by the time you come to somebody like me with this contract, you've already spent time and money pricing. You might have been to a site meeting. You know, you might have, so many subbies have already put deposits in on materials that they have to put on hold, things like that. So I know that you're already invested in wanting the job. And there's only ever been 3 contracts in my entire career for subbies who we've said no to. And in 2 instances, we said no. And in 1 instance, the builder went crazy. And it was actually a really good thing that that didn't happen.
The thing about information as well, it's perishable. If you don't capture at the time, let's like freeze and forget. The longer time goes on, you forget about that. And one consequence I always find, I negotiate quite a few contracts and I get a lot of help as well. One thing I do find is that when you start negotiating contracts, sometimes the people on site don't really understand this one size fits all. And when you start negotiating, a consequence that usually happens is the relationship improves. Because you've done your due diligence, you're going, well, hang on, I can't have 28 months DLP on a material that is going to be installed on top of the material that has no consequence. Why am I signing for this? And then you get, oh, actually, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, because it's one size fits all. Then you start to a relationship of, you do get a more trustful relationship. Not that you're going to come later and start banging them with variations. You know, so a message out, picking up at your lost at sea message is that, yeah, we'll go and get another labourer or a chippy, or we'll go and get X, Y, and Z. All our safety documentation is in place because we don't want to hurt somebody or go to jail. So that kind of focus, we're asking you just to turn that lens or that focus into your contract. It's not that hard when you start to get used to these contracts. The language might be alien to you, but when you start to understand and talking to people like Michelle and the team, you'll sit back and you go, oh, right. So basically, rights to offset. The reason I'm not signing that because I'm exposed X, Y, and Z, or PI insurance. Rather than running around for PI insurance, no, don't need to. I'm not supplying it, and this is why. Cuts all the crap out, all the extra effort and attention. Look, I think we've covered a lot there, and again, I'm just conscious of your time, and I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming and explaining. And I think the points you've raised today genuinely will help anybody listening to this podcast. What closing message would you just give? A very short one.
Oh, a closing message. Okay. If you are going to contract with a builder, check they're licensed. Check Lawcite, LAWCITE, and have a look and see what cases they have had. So just put the builder's name in there. You can do those things for free yourself. Never start work on site without signing a contract or having the contract squared away. If you have got terms and conditions on your quote or your offer that the builder can sign, you might have an opportunity there to get the builder to sign onto your terms. And those of you who are laughing at me saying that, going, yeah, right, she's got no idea what she's talking about. Well, my clients have been able to do it in this period because the urgency around getting trades, the unavailability of labour, you have actually got the leverage to be able to do that in certain circumstances, particularly for the $30,000 contracts. So you need to take the ball by the horns in terms of doing that. And the lasting thing that I think is industry-wide from a policy perspective and an industry values perspective is that if you don't negotiate your contract, you're telling the builder you're desperate.
Yes,
and you're
exactly.
telling the builder that subbies don't negotiate. So
Yeah.
not only are you tainting the industry perception of what a subby should be doing for yourself. So first of all, you're setting the precedent moving forward for that builder. Every single transaction after that, they're going to say, well, you didn't need to do this last time.
Exactly.
So you need to set the standard with the builder and negotiate your contract. But you're also poisoning the rest of the industry, because the more subbies who are out there who just will blindly sign those contracts and accept any terms, it's not, if anything has taught us in the last 2 years, it is, you can't do these jobs at all costs. Not every job is a good job to have. And if you, the worst can happen at the drop of a hat. Like somebody rocked up to the country with COVID, we got locked down, the government stimulated the economy, the price of material went up, everything went crazy, and it flipped on its head in a year. And I'm hopeful that that experience will live with subbies of this generation, and that everyone will be more cautious. But the last thing I want to say is that I firmly believe that the generation of people coming through our education system from my daughter's age, like 3 and 5 years old, will not tolerate the fuckery that goes on in this industry. And if builders think that subbies are disposable, they will not have apprentices coming through, because no one's going to work on site if they keep being treated this way. It's that we just won't have, there will be no subbies, because what subby is going to come out of their apprenticeship and go, yeah, okay, I'll go and start my own business and subsidise the builders' problems. And we're competing with the likes of gaming. Like, people are being paid to play computer games now.
Gaming, the whole. You're right. I mean, that was one of my closing comments. I think there's. Sorry if I stopped you talking there. Apologise. I don't want to. No, okay, sorry. One thing that I've woken up to in the last 5 years is that it's okay, we've got an industry at the moment, but the new generation of attraction, which is the lifeblood, it is the future DNA of our industry. What message are we sending out? I know we're recruiting people. I have struggled for many months recruiting people into my business, because they simply are getting taken into other industries where opportunities are more work-life balance. Other businesses who are catching on to this generational attraction and becoming more socially aware of the generation coming through, not only the 16-year-olds of the millennials and, but not only the Gen X and Y that's fading out now, but this new generation of, they want enrichment. They want to know what the company's ethics are, what the company, does it believe its values? My daughter's 19 and she puts me to the sword. And I've got an amazing wife who is a strong, independent woman who has educated me on the roots of feminism. I'm not a misogynist, but I really wanted to understand it's all about equality. So this generation that's coming through, you're quite right. Where's what does the company stand for? And they're not going to take it. They are not going to have it.
No.
So
they don't tolerate it. And do you know, the patriarchy and the matriarchy who call people woke, that's gaslighting. It's just, they're just of a generation who are looking at the younger generation saying they can't hack it. Well, who's the dumb one? Because the younger ones are just not tolerating the crap.
No, they want an environment that they can work in that means something and it's actually sustainable.
They haven't been convinced why they have to put up with it, because they have options.
Come and work 60 hours a week in construction and 50 hours a week in construction, away for weeks at a time. Yeah, mate. Okay. Well, why should I do that? What does your company stand for? Are you going to treat your supply chain? Do you treat them fairly? Are you good for the environment? Where's my progression? Where's my enrichment? My ability to absorb data is different than you can. Yeah, this is a really, if we don't grasp that concept, the construction industry will go extinct.
Yeah.
I really have enjoyed having you on today, Michelle, because I love someone who is A, willing to help, and B, not take the shit, but also have the answers, rather than just being someone, no, that's shit, but you've got the answers and you've got the experience. And please continue what you're doing. And I hope that more people come to your door and you can help. I always finish with a joke. So I'll just say it. Have you got anything else to add before I close up?
Is this part of the joke? No, joke.
No,
joke.
I'm not that funny. I'm not that ad lib. No, but I just want, just out of courtesy, have you got anything else to close before I close?
No,
Okay.
I think we've covered so much. It's been amazing.
Awesome. Why does James Bond not fart in bed?
Why?
Doesn't want to blow his cover.
Oh,
dad joke of the week. Dad joke of the week.
Dad joke of the week. I have to tell my kids that one, then I'll have to explain who James Bond is.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Oh, great to have you, Michelle. You have a great day, and thanks for your help for the industry. I'm so glad to have you on board.
No worries. It's been great hanging out with you. Thanks again, Paul.
Take care. Bye-bye. Hello, Construction Matters listeners. I've not gone yet. If you want to get in contact with Michelle at Tricks of Your Trade, the contact information is on the bottom of this podcast. And listen in, contracting doesn't have to be that difficult. Like I said, it's not all about worrying about the contract or rushing into jobs that you want to get and keep your business going. Like I said, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So once again, thanks for listening. Look out for more podcasts upcoming. If you want to get in contact with me to discuss anything about construction, that's constructionmatters@outlook.com. That's constructionmatters@outlook.com. As always, look after yourself, your family, your mates, your muckers, your brothers and sisters in construction. If we look after each other, this industry will continue on until it doesn't need to be here anymore, until AI and the robots take over. Just joking. Have a good day, and above all, as a good friend once said to me, Paul, don't take life too seriously. I said, why? He said, because nobody gets out alive. And when you figure that one out, I think life will be a bit gentler on you. Have a good day. See ya.